Well, thanks to Jackson Chourio, at least one of the wild card series won't be a sweep.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. If you don't believe me, I can prove it. Here's a lower third where I'm called Sully. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now. And on Instagram, I am your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And this episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, hey, more like Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today if you know what's good for you. I can tell you what's good for me is to see teams that I don't really have much of an emotional stake in play some good, solid baseball. I'm doing this podcast, and the whole point of the Locked On MLB show is to have an overview over the whole league. I'm not focused on just one team like I did with Locked On A's. And while I can't pretend to be 100% impartial, obviously I did a whole podcast about the A's, and I grew up a big Boston Red Sox fan. And my father, may he rest in peace, was a diehard Giants fan. So I have, you know, connections emotionally to all those teams, but none of those teams are in it this year. I have said with, a full disclosure, I live in the Los Angeles area. I live in Pasadena, and I may be able to score tickets for the NLCS. So yeah, part of me would like to see the Dodgers get in, and also because I live here, it's easier to talk baseball when the local team is doing well. But what I really want is for the series of which I don't really have a horse in the race, a dog in the fight. My dog Eleanor is not in the fight. I just want good baseball. But more importantly, in a postseason series, I want some do or die action. And while we did have that fabulous play in game between the Mets and Atlanta, it wasn't really a do or die game. The Mets beat the Braves, but then the Braves went on to play in the playoffs anyway. That's not a do or die moment. And when you're in a situation where a team can sweep a short series, I find myself instinctively rooting for the other team. Like today, as part of the game was playing as the class was being dismissed at the end of the day. My buddy, who's a diehard baseball fan, is one of my students, and Chris, one of my TAs, who's also a big baseball fan, we all were rooting hard for Baltimore. You would have thought we were, well, you would have thought we were in the wire, but you would have thought we grew up in Baltimore. We would have been in a Barry Levinson film. How about that? We would have been eating at the diner. We would have been living in Avalon. We would have been Tin Men, all those great things. Maybe we would have been in a John Waters film. I don't know. How many Baltimore references can I make that aren't The Wire? We'd be having crab cakes all day long. I love Baltimore. But that's not the point. The point is, you would have thought we all grew up with a smiling bird cap. That's how hard we were rooting for the Baltimore Orioles. And were we rooting that hard for the Baltimore Orioles because we hate the Kansas City Royals? No. We wanted them to win because we wanted a do or die game on Thursday. Now, Chris and my buddy in the classroom, I'm not going to say his name. I don't have his parents' permission to mention his name. Uh, they're both big Dodger fans. So you can imagine they were rooting hard against the Astros. All of Los Angeles became diehard Tiger fans. And in that first game, yes, the Astros lost. And the Astros won't be in the ALCS for the first time since 2016. And yeah, the first bunch of times they got in, They got in under questionable circumstances. But let's just be kind and have something we can all agree on. The first time this decade, the Astros won't be in the ALCS. There you go. No one can have. There's no controversy about that statement. Maybe Dusty Baker got it at the right time. The Mariners must have been looking up and going, "Hell, we could have done that." But it was kind of surprising how quickly the Tigers did their thing to the Houston Astros. I picked the Astros to win that series, and I'm going to tell you my logic behind it. There was one starting pitcher that I had lots of confidence on with Detroit, Derek Skubal, and we knew he was pitching game one. But we also knew that Hinch was going to have to mix and match and Rubik's Cube a pitching staff for the other games. And I took a look and I saw some of the Hunter Browns and the Yusei Kikuchis of the world who were going to be available. Maybe run out. If that's all you needed in a short series. That's why Ronald Blanco was able to pitch out of the bullpen in game one. I had more confidence in the starting pitchers for the Astros in games 2 and 3. And Hunter Brown did do a nice job. He struck out 9 Tigers in 5 and 2/3 innings. I'm not 100% sure why he didn't pitch much longer. There was a couple of times, yes, I know there were some people were pulled because of injury, but there was a couple of times some of the pitchers were pulled and I felt like, but all of Los Angeles quickly fell in love with Andy Ibanez, who cleared the bases with a double and took third on the throw home. We all were calling it a triple when it happened, and for all intents and purposes, it was a triple. But all you could hear all of LA screaming that there's no Houston anymore in the series. And with that, the Tigers are going to move on to play Cleveland. Now, be careful what you wish for, Cleveland fans. I'm sure some Cleveland fans are great. We have to play Houston, and yes, not playing Houston is going to be great. But there's a reason why Detroit won. They've been the best team in the American League for the last couple of months. I still really like Cleveland in that series against Detroit. But Detroit will probably be able to start Skubal in game one because there's a couple of day break. So it'll be a 4 days rest and probably be able to pitch him game five. So you're going to bookend the Cleveland series with the player who's going to be the eventual Cy Young Award winner. But good for Detroit and sticking it to them. By the way, I mentioned the Orioles and the Royals game. Let's give a big hand. Cedric Mullins showed up in both games. He played well. He homered a game-tying home run today, but who really showed up was Bobby Witt Jr. And I like it when our superstars show up big time in the postseason. And Bobby Witt Jr. drove in the only run in game one, and he drove in another run. Today, the Royals scored a grand total of 3 runs in the entire series. Good for Baltimore for shutting them down for 3 runs the entire series. But the home run by Cedric Mullins was the only run batted in Baltimore had in the 2 games. And Bobby Witt Jr. came to play. Absolutely came to play. And Urseg came into play as he sealed the deal, and the Royals are going on to play the Yankees in the next round. I still think I would pick the Yankees, and I thought the Royals were going to beat the Orioles because the Orioles just didn't look that great. We're going to see. We're going to see. This is a very good Royals team. There's a lot of good qualities on this Royals team. I do like the Yankees a lot. As in terms, I don't like them as a fan, but I like them as a baseball observer. And so I stand by that we're going to have a Cleveland versus New York ALCS, but it's not going to involve Cleveland having to beat Houston. The main thing is, can they win the games not started by Tarek Skubal? Because if it goes to a game 5 and they're handing the ball to Skubal, well, do you know what? That's going to be pretty rough. We come back, we're going to talk about the series that may have saved the format and maybe talk about some of the problems with the format. Hey, let's talk about our friends at Booking.com. Booking.com? Yeah, more like Booking.yeah. You can explore U.S. cities you've always secretly want to learn about. with hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, so much more on Booking.com. You may just find the perfect stay even in your rival city during this postseason. I mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning again. I use Booking.com on my summer trip that I took to upstate New York. Went to Buffalo, stayed in a fabulous downtown hotel. By the way, Buffalo is a beautiful city. Then I went to Syracuse, stayed in a nice, safe hotel near the college. Went to see a Syracuse Mets game, and all the way to Cooperstown, where I stayed in an unbelievable hotel right by the lake, but walking distance to the Baseball Hall of Fame. It was fantastic. Booking.com delivers exactly the right US stay for you. And no matter what team you're rooting for this postseason, Booking.com can make you a fan of any US city. From hotels that look over stadium to my fabulous place in Cooperstown, Booking.com has so many choices across the US. The right stay can make you a fan of any US city, even your rivals in baseball. Booking.com. Booking.com? Yeah. More like booking. Yeah. Now, the Padres versus the Braves was a thrilling game. Uh, it was both pitchers left for injuries and ineffectiveness. And Michael Harris II. I always get fascinated by the people who show up when their backs are to the wall. Michael Harris II, not the first and not the third, the second. He went 3 for 4 with a home run and a double. And the other day, he got a pair of hits. I mean, he showed up in both games, kind of like Cedric Mullins showed up for both games. In game one, he doubled and singled for the Orioles in game one. But Michael Harris II showed up big time and made it a game. Absolutely made it a game. But you also made it a game? It was Mr. Jackson Merrill who tripled, and he brought home two of the runs that helped break the game open, of which it looked like the game was going to be a blowout until the Braves and Michael Harris tightened it to a 5-4 situation. But in the end, was the San Diego Padres beating a Braves team that just depleted. You could see they were depleted, and you could see that they just weren't up for the task. But when that game was getting out of hand, I remember thinking, I went to pick my son up at martial arts class, listening to the game on my app, and I started thinking, okay, are we going to see any games tomorrow? Any games? Or is this format just a dud? And oddly, it was Jackson Chourio who may have saved it. Now, whether or not I want the Mets or the Brewers to win this game is completely irrelevant. I wanted a game 5 or was it game 3? I'm sorry. And I didn't want to have a completely blank Thursday and Friday of baseball when we should be excited and having games on every night. Jackson Chourio got the game tying home run, and I forgot who the hell hit the game winning shot. I kept thinking it was Chourio. It was God, I can't. You know what? I'm gonna have to look it up because it just happened not that long ago. It was everyone screaming at the it was Garrett Mitchell. I knew it was a G name, and but yeah, Garrett Mitchell hit the go ahead home run, and he was only in the game because he was brought in as a pinch runner for Gary Sanchez in the second inning. So you forgive me if he isn't on the tip of my tongue. But the Mets, were playing a terrific game, and Shamanaya pitched well enough, and Starling Marte certainly showed up, and it just looked like the Mets were cruising. They were cruising for a bruising. And then Chourio got those hits and got the home runs and tied the game, and the lead came about. And all of a sudden, everyone in Milwaukee were going crazy. They had Barrel Man jumping up and down. Bernie Brewer was there. I was listening to the Mets feed. I was not listening to the Brewers feed, so I can only assume Bob Uecker was happy. But we are going to have baseball. We are going to have a do or die game. We are going to have what this round is supposed to deliver. Now, what is going to happen? Well, the Brewers they had one bad inning in game one that things got away, and then the Mets, piled on a little bit, and they wound up doubling them up. And today, the Brewers just showed up big time when Trio and everyone were hitting the home runs. Well, Quintana is pitching for the Mets. Myers is pitching for the Brewers. And I'll tell you something, Jose Quintana had the last bunch of games that he pitched like an ace. He pitched really well down the stretch. And if I were the Mets, quite frankly, he's the one pitcher that I would love to see them hand the ball to. Myers is pitching for the Milwaukee, and it's in Milwaukee. And a lot of it's just one game. It's inevitably a coin toss when it's just one game. But the Mets have to dust themselves off because if they were, in the eighth inning, 6 outs away from, moving forward and having it be yet another sweep in the wild card series, and to walk away with nothing, that will be a huge gut punch for this Mets team that fought tooth and nail to get to this point. But it's interesting, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but the only time we ever saw a wild card series go to a third game involved the Mets. In 2022, the Mets, who were a terrific team that year, played a underdog Padres team, and Yu Darvish outpitched Max Scherzer in game one. Jacob deGrom won the second one, and then in the final, the Padres just blanked the Mets 6-0, and Citi Field was not happy. Well, I can be pretty sure that Citi Field will not be happy if we don't get to see a game played there. But we're going to see it. It's going to be do or die. This is what you want. You want two teams with a lot on the line and a lot to prove facing off, each throwing a good but not superstar pitcher, and we're going to see what happens. When we come back, I want to talk about some of the flaws in the system and why baseball needs tomorrow's game between Milwaukee and the Mets to be a classic. Let's hear from our good friends over at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can do that at FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book. Let's hear from our good friends over at Prize Picks. You know all about Prize Picks, don't you? Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long. So you can now win the 100 times your money with Prize Picks, and Prize is the best way to get in action in over 30 states, including Georgia, Texas, Florida, and right here in California. Prize is the best way to get real money, sports action, and join over 10 million users and sign up today. If you sign up today, you get $50 instantly when you play the $5. You don't even need to win to get the $50 bonus. So download the app today. Use code Locked On MLB. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. So, Prize Picks, run your game. I was thinking about this the other day. Actually, I was thinking about it a lot after three of the four series just were 2 and out, even with some good games. I was starting to think that maybe this format's a lemon. This format may be a dud. I liked the one game. I liked the urgency of it. And I thought the idea of the two best teams in baseball, basically saying we don't have to play a one and done, but the other four have to, I thought would be kind of intriguing to have that one game playoff. Is it fair? No. There's a lot of things that do. It's also not fair to have the Dodgers, Yankees, Guardians, and Phillies wait around a week and get rusty. Let's keep this thing moving. I am 100% for having that. You need to have the one game, the one day for potential rainouts and everything the day after the season ends. But on Tuesday, play 4 do or die games. Boom, 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 boom. And on Thursday, so you on Tuesday, you play the 4 do or die games. Wednesday, travel day. Thursday, you start the division series. Now, I'm saying that as a maybe you do 2 do or die games on Tuesday and 2 do or die games on Wednesday, and then you start the one division series on Thursday, another division series on Friday. I haven't worked out all the kinks, but I don't think it's good to have a team waiting around and not playing for a week. And if that's the prize you've earned, we've not seen it be a healthy prize. We've seen some of the best teams get knocked out early. And we've also seen that these series have been kind of duds. Now, there have been we have had a couple of good games, like that game when was the between Tampa and Cleveland, one on a walk-off home run in the 14th inning. That was fun. The both games between Kansas City and Baltimore were good this year, close, well-pitched games. Sure, they were fun. Individual, like the when Seattle had that wild comeback against Toronto last year, that was fun. But what's been the classic moment of this format? We haven't had it. The one series that went the distance, you had 4 series in 2022. 3 of them were sweeps. Last year, all 4 were sweeps, and this year, 3 of them were sweeps. So what is that? There's 12 wild card series have been played, and 10 have been sweeps. And the one game 3 we had was a dud when the Padres blanked the Mets 6-0. So that's not a classic moment. And you've seen when there has been a change in the playoff formats, it's helped when there's been a great series or a great moment almost out of the gate. For the between 1903 and 1968, the baseball postseason was the World Series. Whoever was in first place in the American League, whoever was in first place in the National League, they met in the World Series. That was it. In 69, because of expansion, because they wanted to get some other teams into it, they split into divisions. And you had the League Championship Series, American League, and the National League Championship Series. And it was best of 5. And the first few years, the ALCS and the NLCS were duds. There was in 69, both teams swept, both series were sweeps. 70, both series were sweeps. 71, one was a sweep and one was a 4-game series. And it was considered to be a dud. It was considered to be a flop. And then in 1972, the A's and the Tigers went the distance in a crazy series, and the Reds and the Pirates went the distance in a crazy series. And the very next year, the Reds and the Mets went on a crazy, all the way to Game 5. And suddenly, the League Championship Series had their great moments that they could build on. And by 76, you had the Chambliss home run. 77, phenomenal series between the Yankees and Kansas City, culminating in 1980 when the then National League Astros played the Philadelphia Phillies in 1980. And I'll say it, the greatest postseason series of all time. Watch the games. They're all available on the YouTubes. The greatest postseason series of all time was a best of 5 between the Astros and the Phillies in 1980. It is unbelievably dramatic. Back and forth games, Hall of Famers on both sides, unbelievable series. Then they made the next big change. The next big change was in 85 when they expanded the league championship series from best of 5 to best of 7. And before anyone could complain about that, you started seeing great moments. The Royals' wild comeback against the Blue Jays was in the first year they expanded the game to 7 games. The Royals were down 3 games to 1 against a spectacular Toronto Blue Jay team, and they came running back. That same year, the Cardinals stunned the Dodgers with 2 games with dramatic home runs. The Ozzie Smith go crazy, folks, in game 5, and the Jack Clark home run off of Tom Niedenfuer in game 6. Then in 86, you had 2 unbelievable league championship series, the Mets and the Astros and their epic NLCS, and the Dave Henderson, Donnie Moore series with the Red Sox and the Angels. And by the time the decade was over, you just came to grips with the fact that the league championship series was great, whether it was Francisco Cabrera, whether it was Roberto Alomar, home run off of Dennis Eckersley, whether it was Canseco's upper deck home run against the Blue Jays, those fabulous series between the Braves and the Pirates. The league championship series was amazing. Then they expanded again in 95, and before purists like me could get mad, you saw the Yankees and the Mariners have one of the great postseason series of all time. Griffey is coming around. And suddenly everyone saw the division series was wonderful, and some of the great moments in recent baseball history, including Derek Jeter flipping the ball and Jeremy Giambi getting the slide, and so many fabulous, fabulous moments. And now and then expanded again in 2012 with the wild card game. And I loved the wild card game. I love the one and out. And you got to see the Encarnacion home run. You saw the wild and for A's fans heartbreaking extra inning marathon between the A's and the Kansas City Royals. You saw Noah Syndergaard and Madison Bumgarner in their duel in 2016. You saw the Taylor home run walking off the Dodgers against the St. Louis Cardinals. Fabulous games that were do or die. Now we have this format, and we haven't had the great moment yet. As I said, we've had some individual games, but what's the moment that will define the wild card series? We haven't had it yet. Which brings us to tonight. Maybe, just maybe, tonight will be the night. Maybe, just maybe, the Mets and the Brewers can lock antlers and make a classic. Because if they do, that may be the first great moment of the wild card series era. If not, if it's another 6-0 shutout either way, then I'm sorry, we're 3 years in, and this format is kind of a lemon. But we'll see what happens. So follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now. And on Instagram, I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Hoping that we get that classic moment because I want this format to work. This has been Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.